Indivisible Guide when Trump got started, our goal was not to give people hope. We weren't trying to tell everybody it's going to be fine. We're all going to get through this. Don't worry too much about it. We actually, when we first wrote the Indivisible Guide that told people to organize locally, find your community, and start pushing your elected officials, the initial response before we made it public were some people saying, gosh, this is pretty negative. Shouldn't we reach out to the other side? When they go low, shouldn't we go high? Like, this is kind of dark. And we said, look, things are pretty dark. Things are pretty dire. We're facing a crisis in our democracy. We've got to organize and fight back. And so we put out the guide, and the overwhelming response as people around the country started finding their own community, started identifying where they had leverage and started pushing, was this sense of hope. Because it turns out you don't give people hope by telling people, it's going to be fine. You give people hope by telling them you've got power. You are not just a victim of world events. You can actually participate in politics. You don't have to rely on BS politicians to carry us through. You can actually change things. So when we bring together 300 or 400 group leaders from Alaska, from Montana, from Texas, from blue states, from red states, from purple states, the overwhelming sense that you get is we're going to get this shit done. We're going to do this. Let's figure out how to do it. And I come out of that feeling I'm elated, inspired, overwhelmed, excited. And most importantly, I think people come out of that feeling we've got some practical steps we can take to actually make a difference.
Oh, without a doubt. And I do think that when you tell people like to Pollyanna it just makes them angry and it shuts them down.
Yeah, indeed. Yep, that's right.
Well, I think one of the things that's so amazing is that you're saying, you launched Indivisible as a Google Doc, not an organization, right? Like it was 2016, Donald Trump had just been elected, and you and your wife, Leah, sat down as former congressional staffers, and you wrote this guide, this very practical guide to resisting the agenda. You weren't trying to make people have goals and hopes, and you weren't trying to create this big organization. But the Indivisible Guide that you wrote went viral, and it led to New York Times articles and New Yorker places, and you had all these television spots, and it also created all of these thousands of local indivisible groups across America. And here we are 9 years later, and the Indivisible movement is growing every day. But I feel like you and Leah have always stuck with your original premise, which is that Trump is just a symptom of a democracy that was already sick, and that ultimately it's up to all of us to make the country better.
Look, that's right. And I'm not the leader of this movement. Leah isn't the leader of this movement. We're not going to fix this. If we are going to fix this collectively, it's going to take all of us. So, there are 2,200 local indivisible groups now. Every single one of those was started by somebody who raised their hand and said, I guess I've got to organize. I guess I've got to do it. We had a panel during this national convening with new group leaders. And the common story was it's some normal everyday person. It's a teacher. It's a nurse. It's an IT technician. And they find themselves just motivated to show up at some protest, at some rally, or they find themselves in some group and they look around and they say, well, wait, why aren't we organizing? Why isn't anybody collecting email addresses or cell phone numbers? What are we going to do next? And they have an internal debate and they say, well, I'm not a leader. I shouldn't be doing this. Somebody else should be doing it. But every leader of the Indivisible movement went through that internal monologue and debate and said, shit, okay, I guess I will organize. That's what this movement is based on. I am so inspired by people around the country who are deciding in this moment to not sit on the couch. They're deciding to be part of the solution. And it's the only thing that's going to work. And that's not me with an inspirational bumper sticker. These are the lessons from authoritarianism across the world. The way that you push back against an authoritarian that's targeting media institutions, that's targeting businesses, that's targeting universities, that's targeting law firms, when those pillars of liberal democracy are falling, the way you successfully push back is normal people organizing where they are, identify their leverage, linking arms, and fighting back in peaceful, boisterous, empowering ways.
Which is probably why your organization is working so well, because you didn't create it so you could be a big superstar. You created it so that other people could find their power. And that is what's actually happening. It's authentic. It's legitimately grassroots, but it's also not about you guys pulling in big checks to pay yourselves. It's about, really pulling in big numbers to make a big difference. The idea behind Indivisible seems to rest, and correct me if I'm wrong, on the idea that our opponents are absolutely dependent on dividing us. So you believe that we have to treat an attack on one of us as an attack on all of us, that we have to be showing up for each other, particularly those facing the worst of the right-wing ideas right now. So it's like immigrants, people of color, low-income people, the LGBTQ community, and of course, women, right? And your literature says democracy is in grave peril, but it's not dead. Fascists depend on convincing us to give away our power and fall in line. But when we do that, when we give up the fight, that's when we've actually lost. And then you and many others have said we have to be really clear-eyed about this, right? Like, this is a real threat we face, but we cannot be doing the fascist work for them. We have to be in active opposition against them.
Leah, I love how you've done all your homework and you've dug into the literature. You are reading some of my words back at me and some of the words Leah wrote. Oh, gosh. I'm like, yeah, that does sound like what we stand for. That is how we fight. No, look, that is exactly right. Donald Trump is a typical authoritarian. You talk to Maria Stephan, Erica Chenoweth, Timothy Snyder, Heather Cox Richardson. They describe around the world what the authoritarian tries to do, which is to act as if they are all powerful, to act as if they are the only elected official, to act as if they have control of everything. And then they engage in this, as you say, a divide and conquer strategy. They want to focus on the weakest elements of the majority coalition, say, let's all attack that. And then they move on to the next and the next and the next. And so we have a choice right now. We can say, well, I'm a cisgender white man. I'm straight. I'm not immediately under attack. I was born in this country. I'm not going to be targeted right now. Therefore, I won't show up. And you can pick your category and say, that's not under attack right now. And you will wait your turn to be targeted. That is how this works. Or we can treat an attack on one like an attack on all, like you said. And we stand up and we fight. So when immigrants are under attack, we stand up. When ISIS terrorizing communities, we stand up. When trans kids are under attack, we stand up. And we do that because solidarity makes us all stronger. It's not just the morally right thing to do. That's how we freaking win elections. We create an us versus them dynamic where they are the weird minority coming after all of us. And we're with the majority, y'all. We are standing up for majority values. So that is the goal, to draw a circle around 60 or 70% of the population, say, that's us. That's America. We are the majority. And this would-be authoritarian, he's a lame duck. He's unpopular. He's pushing a bad agenda. We're going to reject him and democracy is going to reassert itself. And we do that not just to win an election. We do that to send a really strong signal to the marginal members of elite society, those institutions and leaders who might choose to go along with Trump or might choose to fight back. We want them to know, hey, this era we're in, it's temporary. We are headed towards an era of accountability, and you, CBS News, you, Paul Weiss Law Firm, you, Columbia University, you're still going to be around in 27, in 29, when we've changed who the leaders are and when we're in that era of accountability, and you're going to have to contend with your actions today. So let that factor into your calculus. When you decide to Velo Airlines whether or not to disappear Americans to El Salvador, you're still going to be a freaking airline. So you should choose your actions today carefully because the people are standing up and democracy is reasserting itself.
Yeah, I really hope that is the case. And I do think that's the case. And I do think we cling to the idea of true accountability. But like you said, if you tie a circle around the 60 to 70% of us that actually all agree, I mean, one of the things Indivisible has said is that we need to think of all of us like this giant pro-democracy team, right? Like some of us will play offense, some of us are on defense, but if we all play with the same goal in mind, and that's to protect our country and our democracy and our rule of law, there's no way we can't win because we really do have the numbers on our side. I mean, clearly the Trump administration is doing an epic amount of damage right now. Like we're watching it every single day. But I think we can see that it could be infinitely worse if we weren't standing in their way. Like we're winning 90% of the court cases that are filed against them. Like, yeah, it's taken a long time and it's exhausting to wait for, and they'd get to do their bad thing. And then it gets like peeled back, but then we see like, okay, yes, our health is in grave danger with all these cuts to the FDA and the CDC and the NIH. Like our world-class universities that you're mentioning are in danger with all their federal funds being cut and cut to research. So we're not studying dementia or cancer or all these things that they were really in on. But we're still holding them up, right? We're still holding them up in many, many ways. It looks like these tariffs are going to be overturned. Like all of them, right? You say, I'm going to do this. And you're like, except we don't work on executive order, buddy. And eventually it's going to catch up with you if we keep holding you accountable. Now, that's not ideal, right? But it is hopeful because it shows that our justice system is holding. It shows that our opposition is working, and it shows that our people are fighting back. I think like you're talking